Well, the very beginning, I was born in England and have a very privileged upbringing. My father was a cleric and in his final role was Bishop of Bath and Wells, a wonderful role in the southwest of England. The most wonderful bit of which was that he lived in a medieval bishop's palace, complete with moat and ramparts and a drawbridge. And this great house was full of treasures and in a wonderful location right beside Wells Cathedral. So in a sense, old things, you want to call them that, and history and its preservation was in my blood from a very early stage of my life. I was at school in Wiltshire, and then I read for a degree in theology at Oxford University. And at that stage was not destined for conservation. I actually got a job in a merchant bank in the city. But my father, who was a wise man in so many ways, said, look, is this really what you want to do for the rest of your life? Why not take some time out and go to Australia, where I had a number of family links. In that time, I found myself quite quickly becoming interested in Australian history and indeed teaching it. So that was a fairly fast learning curve, but it got me in a sense back where I really felt most comfortable, in a sense of understanding history and its relevance to contemporary society. That, however, was not where I wanted to spend the rest of my life, and I thought for some time what to do next, and really through a set of circumstances ended up using skills I'd developed at school in woodwork to train as a furniture conservator. I did that back in England at a wonderful, another medieval house called Westdean in Sussex, which was running diplomas in furniture conservation, and then worked privately in London, but was itching to come back to Australia, and a position came up at the Powerhouse Museum, which was being built at the time. This is the early 80s, and it fitted me perfectly, and they thought it fitted them perfectly too. ICS came into life on the 1st of July 1991, but it had evolved from an earlier company I had set up called Campbell Conservation, which we had come about really through an opportunity existed around the bicentenary of Governor Phillip's arrival in 1988. I had been working at the Powerhouse Museum, and through essentially a rich man saying, I think there's an opportunity here, and my agreeing with him, he agreed to fund Campbell Conservation. So Campbell's drew together 3 or 4 conservators, specifically in works on paper and textiles and my discipline, furniture. But by 1991, we were growing quite rapidly, and it became clear that there was a bigger opportunity. So we amalgamated with another company called Corrigan's, who had a paintings conservation component, in particular a wonderful paintings conservator called Cathy Lillico-Thompson. And Cathy and I took the project and indeed the company forward under this new nomenclature and indeed ownership at that time. So it grew from initially in 1991, I suppose there were half a dozen of us. It grew progressively during the 1990s. We had a number of big projects that we worked on. Standout are the restoration of the Capitol Theatre in Haymarket in Sydney, then the restoration of St Andrew's Cathedral and Sydney Town Hall, a very innovative project at the Children's Chapel at St James's King Street, where we removed an incredible painted mural from a wall and reinstated it on a new backing. Progressively we grew, I suppose, from in a sense, a fine and decorative arts organisation, then into public art, and then into built heritage. So we were doing more and more work on buildings as well, and that requires a whole separate discipline. And then also through my association with Antarctica, we'd come across Doug Rogan, who runs our museums and gallery services. He was our first non-conservator. He is a collection manager and museum specialist, and so with him joining us, we set up a museum and gallery service as well, and grew that in parallel very comfortably with our hands-on conservation services. So in terms of hopes, we want to be the best conservation company in the world. I mean, it's as simple as that. And that means not just in the technical expertise of our work, but in the way we service our clients, the way we work together as a group, the way in which we think about innovation in this field. And there are lots of opportunities on that. I have, for instance, today been thinking around the whole issue of how you look after public art collections in an innovative way, using technology around how we document it, and then how we database collections and use that as a mapping and planning document. A small example of the way in which this space continually requires opportunities and innovative solutions. It's a really good question how conservation has changed in say 40 years I've been involved. I think fundamentally conservators have grown in their contextual understanding, let's put it that way, that I trained and many of my colleagues trained as, if you like, bench conservators, where an object would be put on the bench and the conservator would assess what needs doing to it and what the optimum treatment might be. What we've become much better at is understanding the context around that object, its significance, and how that should inform our conservation. I remember early on in my career being given such a good example of that, of a treatment of a bejeweled crucifix that was carried in procession. It was carried in procession from a church in Venice. And it was treated as a beautiful jewelled object. Became later clear that in fact it was the cross used to lead condemned men to the gallows. It therefore had a completely different context in the sense of the fact that it was gazed upon by men as they were led to their life's end, and indeed informed ultimately how it should be approached. That's perhaps an extreme example, but it shows how contextually we need constantly to think how these objects were used. I think the other thing that relates to that is conservators work much more interdisciplinarily. We as a company perhaps have helped that process in Australia by employing museum and gallery experts who are not conservators, and indeed built heritage experts. A good example of that is the built heritage in this country is very based around the importance of conservation management plans, CMPs as they know, for guiding decision making. What's happened recently is that progressively, conservators have been thinking, how can we also apply that methodology of management plans to looking after collections and indeed individual objects. And it's become a much more standard tool for conservators in that time. So perhaps two things have really changed: contextual understanding and appreciation, and a wider interdisciplinary discussion and understanding and interface. Climate change and conservation is a big thing. Two things are really going to happen. We're warming up as a planet, and thermal overload has a direct impact on the way in which objects respond to that. I think also that we are getting weirder, wilder, less predictable, less consistent weather, and with that comes extreme storms, and with that often comes drenching rain, and off the back of that are floods and then mould. And mould is something which is becoming more and more central to conservators' toolbox needs, I suppose. So we're going to see more and more mould remediation required, and prevention by appropriate environments and other methods to ensure that we can deal with that. So climate change is impacting on the condition of objects, and therefore the demands on conservators to minimise deterioration around that. What I love most about this profession, which I am indeed passionate about, is that every day is different, that no object needs the same treatment as any other. They're all subtly and sometimes massively different, that the problems that come with them are never quite the same, and the challenges and the opportunities in terms of treatment. And so one keeps learning. I find also the stimulation of working with like-minded, passionate people just continues to power me on in terms of learning from them and understanding and think about what we do every day of our lives as conservators. If you were considering a career in conservation, and do, because it is one of the most rewarding I think you can engage on, I think you need to think about the angle you're coming in at. Are you coming in most interested in the science or the art history? Neither is right nor wrong, and we need both. But I think it does help to identify personally which of those you're more interested in, because it will guide how you train and interface with other conservators. But I think more broadly, listen, learn, join museums and galleries as volunteers, understand why objects deteriorate, understand what's special about them individually and collectively, and ensure that you never think you know it all, because it is an ever-learning process. But at the end of it all, there are many wonderful people in conservation. There are so many things to learn. It'll take you around the world. It'll interface you with a common language around the world, and it'll be richly rewarding.